The Accident by Jonathan Davidson, with Francis Barber, David Bradley, Richard Bremer, Kerry Shale, and Eleanor Tremaine.
Thank you, that's lovely.
So many of you British still take sugar in your tea.
I know, terrible, isn't it?
No, not terrible, but interesting.
I tried to stop, but we were brought up on it. The spoons used to stand up in my dad's tea.
The spoons used to stand up?
He used to say that he wanted to be able to dance a mouse on his tea.
Dance a mouse on his tea?
Yes, I mean, he had so much sugar in his tea, and it was strong tea, that... well, it was very strong, you see.
Oh, yes, I see. Yes, very good.
Yes. He liked his tea brewed strongly.
Yes, I see. Miss Norton, may I call you Susan?
Yes, of course.
I'm very pleased you made contact with me, Susan. I know it is not always easy to make the initial call. Therapy is not everyone's...
Cup of tea.
Cup of tea, exactly. And many people have misconceptions of how a therapist can help them.
Yes.
Please tell me how you think I can help you.
I don't know if you can. I hope you can, but I...
Go on.
It's been so long now, I can't imagine things ever being any different. So... I don't know if you can help me.
Well, let me ask you instead to tell me why you are here.
My dad, my father, he was a signalman on the railways.
A signalman?
Yes. He worked the signals in a signal box and changed the points. Do you know what I mean? You probably call them something different in America.
A controller, I think, or a switcher.
Controller. Like the fat controller, or the thin controller. Oh, that would have tickled him if we'd called him that. He wasn't really in control of anything. In fact, he used to say that he was the one being controlled. Every minute of his shift, always having to be there to keep things running.
It was difficult work.
Not clever work. I mean, he was clever enough, but you didn't need to have gone to college or anything like that, certainly not in his day. You just learned it, and once you'd learned it, all the rules and how things ran, where you were, just worked and worked. That was it. That was your career. And he was always waiting to be called out to work some more. He was a signalman anyway. That's what we called them back home.
What is it about your father that concerns you?
He was a very good man. A very decent man. He always did the right thing. He was always proper in the way he lived his life. He'd worked on the railways from when he was a boy. He loved the engines.
How does this concern you, Susan? What was your relationship with your father?
Our relationship was just as it should have been. He was a very kind man. He was a very loving man, and he loved me. And he loved my mother. And everyone thought well of him, even afterwards. Everyone. I'm sorry. It shouldn't be like this. I don't want to feel like this. Blah, blah, sorry.
Susan, when you're ready, please carry on. What happened to your father?
I killed him.
I see.
It was my fault. I was there, and it was my fault. I don't care what anyone says. I know what happened. I was silly, stupid fool, and in the end it killed him. And I'll never be able to forgive myself. I did
kill him.
I tell you what, Susan, the up parcels is flying tonight. Do you see the lick he had on him then? What's his hurry? Anyway, better let Jim know.
We should keep that window shut, Dad. It's freezing here with it open.
Hey, madam, I won't be ordered about by you, thank you very much.
Well, it is cold. This stove's giving out no heat at all. Are you sure it's not gone out?
You'll be going out if you don't stop your moaning. This isn't a hotel, you know. It's a signal box. So I'll thank you to keep your comments to yourself or get off home. Let me get the board put back now he's gone past. Now make yourself useful and write up the bells. Upline 525 parcels. Train entering section sent 812. Received 812. Train out of section received 818.
Out of section received from box in advance 818.
I hope you're writing neatly.
Yes, I am, Dad.
And you're writing as I showed you, aren't you? None of your silly girls' letters.
Come and have a look if you don't trust me.
Bad enough letting you write up the register without it being unreadable nonsense.
Written up. What shall I do next?
Nothing.
Oh, nothing.
You know, I think that the wire on that upstarter signal needs to be seen to. Seems to be getting harder to pull these last few days.
It's not, you know, Dad. I pulled it the other night after the fish train had come through and it was easy enough. Perhaps you're just getting too old for it.
Too old for it. Rubbish. Well, there's the London coal empties asking for the road.
He's early, isn't he? He doesn't normally get here till 8:30.
Oh, you're a smart one and no mistake.
Oh, only saying.
Well, yes, as it happens, he is early. You're right. Jim was on the phone about it before you got here with my dinner. They let the coal out on the main line, couple of boxes up, and he's had the down semi-fast behind him ever since.
Was the semi-fast running late then?
Yes, as per usual. Too tightly timed, that train, especially if things are busy. Anyway, they'll have told matey boy on the coal that he was ahead of the semi-fast when he came off the junction line. He'll have been trying to keep ahead of it until he can get on the goods line the other side of Fred's section.
But they won't want to hold up the semi-fast, will they?
Certainly won't. That's why we're going to get train entering section from Jim in a few moments, and then the coal will come stomping past like there's no tomorrow. I know these blokes. Last thing he wants is to get shunted into a siding and have to sit there all night waiting for a clear road. If they've got a half-decent engine on this coal, they'll be flogging it to bits and blowing their whistle for me to give them a clear run on.
I'll pull the distance signal, shall I, Dad?
Home signal first, girl.
I know. Home. Starter. And distant. Easy.
Very likely. Here she comes. Look at that. 60 years old that engine is. Absolutely beautiful.
Shall I ring train entering section to Fred?
Go on then. But go at it gently.
And train out of section to Jim?
Give me a chance. I need to replace the signals first. You know the rules.
Now can I send out a section?
As you wish, madam. You know the bells?
Dad? Of course I know them. I'm a signalman's daughter, aren't I?
Fine. Well, I'll write up the register then. You know, you could do this job on your own these days.
And I'd like to.
Well, I'm telling you there's no point. No point even thinking about it.
Would they let me?
Would they let you what?
Work here. Do you think I could do this as a job when I leave school? I could leave next year, couldn't I? Get trained up. Work here or up the line when Fred retires.
What? The coal's away.
Shall I reply?
Out of my way, I'll do them. I'm the one who's supposed to be ringing the bloody bells. It's my job. That's what I'm paid for. You shouldn't even be here.
Well?
Well, what?
How about it, Dad? Susan Norton, British Rail, Western Region's First Lady Signalman. Signal woman. First for 1964.
I'll tell you what'll be a first.
What?
You making the tea without being asked. So forget about signalling and start brewing. Then you're off home. You've been here long enough.
It's okay. Take your time.
It's not okay. It's not been okay for 40 years.
It's okay to express your feelings, Susan. You must understand this. I'm here to listen to you. I'm here to try to understand. Now, Susan, you said you killed your father. What did you mean by that?
I meant what I said. I did kill him. I was there when it happened and I did kill him.
Susan, please tell me what happened.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was 16. It had been my birthday the week before. This was 1964. I was restless. I'm not sure why, but I know I felt very restless. I was always arguing with him. Then I was niggling away at things. Getting on his nerves, I suppose.
And your mother, how was your relationship with her?
Oh, my relationship with her was perfect. Very stable. My mother had died 4 years before. It was just the two of us. Dad and me.
I see. And did your father remarry?
No, of course not. I suppose he could have done. I suppose he should have done. But we just carried on. Just the two of us.
For 4 years, you had just carried on?
Yes. Dad had his job, and he had to carry on doing that. She'd been ill for a long while, so things didn't change much for me. I didn't mind.
I see.
Don't you want to know how I felt about my mother dying?
Tell me what you would like to tell me.
I was fine, actually. I was what you'd call adjusted. Very well adjusted. Everyone had rallied round. I'd not been short of people wanting to mother me, but after a while I didn't need a mother. In fact, I suppose I became a bit of a mother to my dad, if that makes sense. He was the one wanted looking after.
Yes. Yes, that makes sense. Everything you are saying is clear.
We had a routine. I got to making sure he always had something to eat before he went on shift. I didn't worry about him exactly, but I cared for him. I always wanted to do what was best for him, and then that evening I ended up hurting him.
Did your father work alone in the signal box?
He shouldn't have done, really, because it was a busy box. He always said that he was only a couple of marks off getting a lad to work with him, write up the train register. That's the big book we had to fill in. Everything we did in the signal box had to be written up, all the bell codes we received, all the beeps we sent back out, anything untoward, it all went down in the register. One of the first things they looked at after the accident.
I see.
But it wasn't quite busy enough, so he was on his own. But I was with him when I could be.
Was it allowed for you to visit your father at his place of work?
If we'd been caught, we'd have all been in trouble. You know, if an inspector had walked in and found me sending bells down the line to the next signal box, or writing up the train register, or dropping the distant...
Dropping the distant, I'm afraid you've lost me.
Distants are signals. They warn the drivers of what the home signal is going to be. Home's the important signal. If the home signal's on, he has to stop, and the distant tells him if it's on and gives him time to slow down. But they were always a long way from the home signal, so it took a fair pull of the signal lever to clear a distant.
How often did you help your father? It isn't what one would expect a teenage girl to be doing.
Well, that February I remember I was to and fro from our house to the signal box every day. He was working nights, and they were long shifts. Anyway, I must have brought my dad something to eat, and there was just the two of us, tucked up in our little signal box with everything cold and still and icy outside, and our lights burning and the bells ringing, and watching the trains going up and down like nothing was ever going to change.
Susan?
Susan, this is decent tea. I'll give that to you. At least you're not one of those types who just shows the tea to the pot. You let it draw properly.
Dad, I am serious.
Well, you need to be serious about tea. Tea can't be taken lightly. First thing I learned when I started to work was to make a decent cup of tea.
No, I'm serious about a job on the railways when I leave school.
Susan, you're a good girl. A very good girl. Your handwriting is lovely and you can cook well. And you make a lovely cup of tea.
Dad, I know all that.
Well, I'm glad you do. What I'm saying is that with all that, you ought to work in an office until you're ready to marry. Or you could work in a bank. A bank's always good.
Oh, Dad, I don't want to be shut up in some office.
Be a teacher. You could be a teacher. Fred's girl's going for teaching. Nice little village school. Talk the devil, there's Fred now.
The upco. Late, isn't he? But he had time to come through before the sleeper.
Yes, he is late. And I knew that. Now quiet yourself for a minute. I need to think here.
Only saying.
Well, only don't say. I know what you were doing. Showing off is what you were doing. Well, there's a lot more to this job than knowing the bells. Any fool can learn bell codes.
Oh, I'm a fool now, am I? Thank you very much, Dad.
I don't think you're a fool, do I? All I'm saying is that there's more to it. I've got a bit of a problem now, haven't I? Eh? Do I let the coal through and risk the upsleeper being pulled up short?
Or do you pull the coal into the refuge siding and then have him stuck there for half the night waiting for a path out?
This coal will be from Newport or Cardiff or somewhere. And I know what those lot are like. The driver will be tramping up here, shouting about how he's always held up and making out I don't know my job. I've had it all before.
Well, I think it's all very simple, actually, Dad.
Oh, simple, is it? So I'm the idiot now, am I? With my own daughter who knows bugger all about how to run a railway giving me lectures on signalling? Well, perhaps you'd like to tell me what Fred's just belled me with?
Train entering section for the upco?
Wrong. Thank God you're not here on your own. First lady signalman on the Western region. We'd have trains all over the place.
What was it then? Couldn't hear properly because you were giving me one of your talkings to.
Lucky my ears are sharp. He's cancelled the up coal, and if I'm not very much mistaken, he'll be offering me something else in a second. Probably the up sleeper.
Light engine.
They're supposed to let me know about these things. Right, well, if that's what they want, I can send it through. Let some other bloke worry about it. I don't want it here when I have the coal and the sleeper to sort out in a few minutes. OK, Fred, I allowed that. And now on to Jim. Hoping he can take it, that is.
You're going to let it through? You're not going to put it in the refuge siding? You've got the sleeper and the coal behind it now. Well, why don't you delay them both if the light engine hasn't cleared quickly enough?
I know all that. It's all up here, every bloody train movement for the next 10 hours, in my head. I know what's going to happen next and you don't, so it's about time you said a little less and thought a little more. Leave it. My phone.
Yes, Dad.
Yes? Hello?
Susan, I cannot pretend to understand exactly what you're telling me.
It's complicated. It looked easy then, but I can see now that it is complicated. I don't expect you to understand.
Well, I am trying to understand. Now, you have a train traveling towards you, a slow train carrying coal, and you have a locomotive. How did you describe it?
A light engine. A locomotive on its own. Yes, that was coming along too, in front of them all.
And behind it, and behind the coal train, is the train of sleeping cars.
Yes. We had one sleeper a night. It was a very special train. I used to love to see it pass with all its lights dimmed, swaying into the darkness, taking all those sleeping people to important places.
And something happened to this train. Am I right, Susan?
Something did happen to the train. You wouldn't have heard of it over here, and anyway, you're far too young. It made all the papers in England. It was terrible what happened.
And what did happen, Susan, if I can ask? Was this the train that killed your father?
No, he wasn't killed. Not then. He wasn't even hurt, not physically. Plenty were killed, but he wasn't one of them. But it started then. The whole thing started then. The investigation and the accusations. And it was all my fault. I was to blame.
I don't know.
You don't know, or you won't say.
I can't remember. Something happened. Something went wrong.
Yes, I realize something went wrong. This inquiry is well aware that something went wrong. The injured know something went wrong. The relatives of those who died in this terrible tragedy know that something went terribly wrong. My interest now is in what went wrong and why. With all your years of service, with all your experience, you appeared to make a serious mistake, a terrible error of judgment.
I must object again. We do not know that it was an error of judgment, and we do not know it was a mistake. The condition of the equipment in that signal box is still in question, and it was a terrible night.
I'm sorry, but it is my understanding that we have discounted mechanical failure, and it was certainly a night of unpleasant weather, but that had no bearing on the fact that the up sleeper was signalled onto a section of track clearly occupied by a locomotive travelling light engine, also on the up line. Why was that?
We didn't know the light engine was still there. It had been forgotten.
We didn't know. You were not alone that night in your signal box. Was there someone with you that night in your signal box?
Right. This is getting tricky. So that's the light engine held at our starter signal, waiting for the coal to come up the refuge so they can change crews. Then we let it go forward, followed by the up sleeper.
What's happened to the up coal?
The up coal's in the refuge siding. I said that, didn't I? We put it in the refuge and bring it up to our starter so it's level with the light engine. The crew swap over and we let the light engine go. Simple. So I cancel those last bells to Jim.
You'll have time to get the coal back out, won't you, Dad?
I might not. All depends. I don't want to hold the sleeper up if I can help it. That's the coal entering the refuge.
You're always saying how you don't like to hold any trains back if you can give them the road.
Look, I can't go into this now. That's an express on the down line. You should be getting off home, and I've got a railway to run. This isn't plain trains, you know. It's a serious business.
I'm never going to learn if you won't let me stay, will I?
Yes? Oh, right. Hold the light engine there. Right. Understood. More changes. Now they want the coal to go through.
So how's the sleeper doing, Dad? Can't you find out?
Of course I can find out. That's what all these wretched telephones are for, aren't they? Look, are you going or not? I can't have you sitting round all evening, and you don't want to be going back home too late. That's the down express. Let me send him on. Train out of section for the coal to Fred.
see the sleeper go through. You're always saying how good it looks at full tilt this time of night.
Susan, for the last time, are you going or not? In fact, don't even answer that question, my girl. Get your coat on and get yourself home. I can't run this signal box with you chattering away 20 to the dozen.
In a minute, Dad. Let me stay for the sleeper.
Yes, mate. Well, I can't. I just send the up coal on. But Jim can put her in his refuge siding. You send the sleeper when you like. I keep her running if I can. All right.
Who's that?
The sleeper's on its way. Just as you wanted, miss. I'll send it on to Jim.
Shall I put back the signals?
Yes. Let's keep her running. Jim's giving me the road. Look, I thought you were getting off home. Now go. She's on her way. Let's get the window open. Have a good look at her.
What was that?
Christ almighty.
Dad?
I'm waiting for an answer, Mr. Norton. Who is the we you referred to a moment ago?
I didn't mean we.
We didn't mean we, he meant me, that is, I.
Something was distracting you that night. You are a conscientious worker. You're a credit to your trade. You have an excellent record. Was there something on your mind that night?
No, nothing in particular.
Nothing in particular. Then how can you explain your actions that night? How can you explain what can only be a strange lapse of concentration? How can you explain what you did and what you didn't do that night?
I must protest. You are making the assumption that my member is guilty of something. He's guilty of nothing. He is simply a railwayman trying to do his job to the best of his ability.
I don't doubt that, Mr. Jenkins.
If he lost his concentration for even a moment, and we've no proof of that, it was because he was being put under enormous strain by the current management of the railways. My member does not have an easy life. His wife died 4 years ago, and since then he has selflessly looked after his daughter and continued to perform his duties to the utmost of his abilities.
That's got nothing to do with this, Roy. They want to know what happened, and it's got nothing to do with Susan or her mother.
Susan is your daughter?
Yes, she is.
May I ask how old she is?
She's just turned 16. She was 16 a month ago.
Railway families are very supportive, Mr. Phillips. Any daughter of any railwayman would look to help her father in any way she could. But can I ask why we are discussing my member's family life?
I'm wondering if Mr. Norton's daughter was causing him some concern that night.
Why should she? Why the hell should she? She was a good girl. She brought me my tea that night. Cycled 2 miles to deliver it on a night like that.
Your daughter came to the signal box.
Everything went wrong.
What went wrong?
Everything. The bells were ringing on, and the phone ringing. We couldn't cope. Suddenly we couldn't cope, but we couldn't stop. Trains were coming at us up and down, and there was suddenly no rest, and we were exhausted.
Did he fall asleep? Was that what happened?
No, he was awake all right, and so was I. And he kept on telling me to go, and I wouldn't. I was so stubborn, so stupid and stubborn. Arguing away we were about what I should do when I left school, and then about the trains and what to do with them.
And this was while he was working?
Yes, and that was what was so stupid of me. I just couldn't wait. I'd have my say. Never mind the railway, never mind his beloved railway. He loved the railway, and I took it from him.
But, Susan, it was an accident, surely.
There are no accidents on the railways. Everything is someone's fault. That's what the inquiries always say. That's what his inquiry said, anyway. They made it clear. He was to blame.
And you were not to blame.
I wasn't even there.
But you were, weren't you? Susan, were you really present in your father's signal box at the time of the accident?
Yes. Yes, I was. That's what's so terrible, so awful. I was there, and he said I wasn't. He swore I wasn't. He wrote me out. He disowned me. Can you imagine how that feels? I was his daughter. I looked after him. I loved him. And when the time came to tell the truth, he lied. He lied because he didn't want my help. He didn't want me to tell them what happened. He didn't want me to explain about the bells and the arguing and the fog and the phone calls and the cold and the stove not working properly and him being so tired working day after day. And when I should have been there for him, he turned away from me and they made his life hell.
You were not involved in this inquiry?
No. I wasn't there, but I heard all about it. They sent me away. Suddenly I was with an aunt and uncle miles away down the line. They were railway folk. They knew what had gone on, everyone did. But no one said. And I said nothing. I just sat there on their big old sofa in that little cottage, and I said nothing. Not a word. Not for months.
You chose not to speak. This is interesting.
Wasn't interesting. I hated him. I had decided I hated him. He didn't need me. Perhaps he'd never needed me. All his being my kind daddy was a lie. He had his job and that was all he wanted. And even at the end, when they had him down on his knees, begging forgiveness, he would not ask for help from me. He knew I'd killed those people as much as he had, but he wouldn't let me take a single shred of blame. He was a hard, mean man.
Dad?
It's that bloody light engine. We've just cleared the starter signal for him.
What about the sleeper?
He'll be on him in a minute. Quick, raise the signals on it.
Dad!
Bloody hell, he'll be on us in a minute.
Dad, make him stop, Dad! Dad!
Oh no.
Your daughter was in the signal box the night of the accident. Am I correct?
No. I've told you. No.
My member has already made it clear to you that he was alone.
Well, someone was there. Someone who distracted you. We've heard the evidence. The driver of the coal train heard a voice in the background when he phoned your signal box.
He misheard. He wasn't listening clearly, otherwise he would have known I had no intention of letting him out of the refuge this side of Christmas.
And you were distracted. And the driver of a train passing on the down line a few minutes later saw a figure in your signal box, a figure of a girl.
There was no girl there, that's what Mr. Norton is saying. His daughter was at home, probably asleep.
Mr. Norton, we are offering you the chance to explain yourself, to explain what really happened that night, perhaps to exonerate yourself, or at the very least throw some light on those last fateful hours before the accident. Now, I have a suspicion that you were not alone that night, that against the rules you had your daughter with you, in your signal box. Possibly she was there simply to fetch you a late supper. Possibly you asked her to help you for a moment when the work became heavy. And something went wrong. And then there was the accident. But you have claimed she was not there, was never there. I will not bring a child to this inquiry, when unfortunately I have no admissible evidence to suggest that she was there. I suspect if I did, she would say she was elsewhere. And none of us want to find someone so young guilty of anything. Not me, nor the board, nor the union. Isn't that right, Mr. Jenkins? We want to have a man in front of us answering our questions. So I have no option. I have no choice but to recommend you stand trial for manslaughter.
So he was committed to trial?
Yes. He had rejected me and I had rejected him. And I was to blame. When he pulled that lever to put the home signal back to danger, I knew he'd done it too late. I knew that the sleeper would never be able to stop in time. And I just stood there, watching him do it, knowing it was my bickering that had made him forget, that had made him do it. I remember the silence, when we'd both realised what had happened, hearing the sleeper hurtle past and knowing it was going to smash into the other engine. We heard it go, and it grew quieter and quieter. And I remember hearing the wind going through the telegraph wires and the wooden walls of the signal box creaking ever so slightly. And it was almost silent. It was like a vacuum waiting to be filled by something. And then we heard the crash. First of all, it was the whistle of the express engine, howling like mad. And then it was just a crunching sound in the distance, like the sound of a sheet of paper being screwed into a ball and thrown into a fire.
And after the sound of the crash in the distance?
After that, nothing was ever the same again.
Dad?
Go.
What?
Go home. Now.
No, Dad.
Yes. Get out of here now. Go home. Go home like I told you to do half an hour. hour ago.
I'll see you at home, Dad.
Just go, Susan.
I'll see you in the morning, Dad. I'll see you at home tomorrow morning.
Yes, I know. I'll send line block to Fred. Speak to Control. Tell them what I've done. Tell them I'm very sorry.
Susan, Arthur, I knew you both. We all knew you. 30 years on the railways, Arthur. Up and down the line, this signal box, then that signal box. Getting married, settling down, Arthur with his daughter. Sweet little thing, Susan. I gave her her first trip on the footplate, you remember? I was always one for breaking the rules myself. And now the rules have broken me. Like a sheet of paper being screwed up and thrown into the fire, you say. Well, I'm about 40 seconds from that fire and it feels very hot here. On the engine, with my train of sleeping folk behind me, swaying through the darkness like babies in cradles. In a moment I'll see the tail lamp on the light engine ahead and I'll say to my fireman, Bill, I'll say, bloody hell, they've got us this time, Bill, the line's blocked. But for the moment, I can only think of you two up in your signal box, arguing away as you always did. Such a couple you were. We all said so. She was a proper little wife to you when Sally died. I thought of you two when I came past, day or night. And I think of you now, and how the railway got you in the end. One tight moment too many. One blink of concentration and you set us off like men running into gunfire. And you'll never forgive yourselves, will you? In fact, you'll never speak again, not to each other. What brought so many people together, I mean, the railways taking people to each other year after year, tore you two apart. You won't be the first, and you won't be the last. Arthur, you were a man who always wanted to do right, and then one day you did wrong. And Susan, you were a girl who loved her dad and loved the trains and the tracks and the signals and the bells and the levers. You couldn't leave them alone. Where's the harm in that? But they always want someone to blame. They always want someone to carry the can. Salisbury in 1906. Quintin's Hill in 1915, Abermule in 21, Castle Carey in 37, and now Harrow in 52, and Lewisham in 57, and Winsford the other year. That's what really puts my back up. This is British Railways now. We're all in this together now, so don't be frightened. It's coming towards us now. Clapham Junction in 81. I can see the lights approaching. Southall in 97. We're almost there. Ladbroke Grove in 1999. Hold on tight, Bill. Here comes Hatfield and Potter's Bar. And when we're through them, there's Didcot Parkway and Coventry and Lime Street. They're still to come. They're on their way. Even on the best run railway. Even on our railway. Things go wrong. You're sorry. I'm sorry. We're all sorry. It was the accident's fault, not yours.
In The Accident, young Susan was played by Eleanor Tremaine. Older Susan by Francis Barber, Arthur Norton, the signalman by Richard Bremer, The Union Rep and the Train Driver by David Bradley, and The Therapist and the Investigator